In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where death whispers through every shadow and survival depends on split-second decisions, 8 elite Navy SEALs found themselves trapped in what would become one of the most harrowing firefights of the war. Surrounded by enemy forces, ammunition running low, and escape routes cut off, they faced certain annihilation. But sometimes, when hope seems lost and death appears inevitable, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. This is the true story of how one hidden warrior, positioned among the ancient rocks like a ghost from another time, turned the tide of battle with nothing but skill, courage, and an unwavering commitment to never leave a brother behind. What happened next would be talked about in hushed tones in military circles for years to come, a testament to the brotherhood that transcends all boundaries and the guardian angels who watch over those who serve. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain of the Cunard province as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison studied the intelligence briefing one final time. The photographs showed a compound nestled deep in the mountain valley, surrounded by steep cliffs and narrow passages that had sheltered insurgents for months. This was not just another routine operation. Intelligence indicated that a high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks on coalition forces, was hiding in this remote stronghold. Morrison's team consisted of 7 other seasoned operators, each man handpicked for this critical mission. There was Chief Petty Officer Marcus Chun, a communications specialist whose calm demeanor under fire had saved countless lives. Petty Officer First Class David Rodriguez served as the team's medic, carrying not just medical supplies, but the weight of keeping his brothers alive. The youngest member, Petty Officer Second Class Tyler Brooks, was their explosive ordnance specialist, barely 25, but already legendary for his ability to disable the most complex improvised devices. Senior Chief Petty Officer Robert "Tank" Williams earned his nickname not just from his imposing 6'4" frame, but from his ability to punch through enemy defenses like an unstoppable force. Petty Officer First Class Anthony "Spider" Morelli moved through terrain with an almost supernatural grace, making him their primary scout. Chief Petty Officer James "Hawk" Henderson possessed eyes that could spot movement at incredible distances, serving as their designated marksman. Finally, there was Petty Officer First Class Samuel "Ghost" Parker, whose specialty in close-quarters combat had earned him respect throughout the special operations community. The helicopter insertion had gone smoothly under cover of darkness, with the team fast roping into a landing zone several kilometers from their target. They moved through the rocky terrain like shadows, their night vision goggles turning the landscape into an eerie green world of boulders and crevices. The plan was straightforward in concept but challenging in execution. They would establish observation positions around the compound, gather intelligence on enemy strength and positions, then execute a coordinated assault to capture or eliminate the target. As dawn approached, the team split into 2 elements. Morrison led the primary assault team, consisting of himself, Rodriguez, Brooks, and Williams. They would approach the compound from the south, using a dried riverbed for concealment. The second element, commanded by Chief Chun and including Morelli, Henderson, and Parker, would position themselves on the high ground to the north, providing overwatch and fire support when the assault began. The compound appeared quiet as the sun climbed higher, its mud brick walls showing signs of recent reinforcement. Intelligence had suggested a small security force, perhaps 6 to 8 fighters. What the briefing had not revealed was the network of fighting positions carved into the surrounding cliffs, invisible from satellite imagery, but perfectly positioned to create interlocking fields of fire around the target building. Morrison's element reached their assault position without incident, taking cover behind a cluster of boulders approximately 200 meters from the compound's main entrance. Through his binoculars, he could see movement in the courtyard, confirming that the location was indeed occupied. He keyed his radio to coordinate with Chin's Overwatch team, but the response that came back sent a chill through his veins. Chin's voice was tense, but controlled as he reported what they were seeing from their elevated position. The compound was not lightly defended as intelligence had suggested. Instead, it appeared to be a significant stronghold with numerous fighting positions cut into the rock face. Worse still, Chen had spotted movement in positions that would allow enemy fighters to surround any assault force that approached the main building. The mission parameters had clearly changed, but backing down was not an option. The target was too valuable, and intelligence suggested he would be moving to a new location within hours. Morrison made the decision to proceed, knowing that his team's training and experience would have to overcome the disadvantage of facing a larger enemy force in prepared positions. As the assault team prepared to advance, Henderson's sharp eyes caught something that made him reach immediately for his rifle. Muzzle flashes appeared simultaneously from multiple positions around the compound, and the distinctive crack of AK-47 fire echoed off the canyon walls. The enemy had spotted them first and opened fire from concealed positions that the SEALs had not detected. Bullets whined off the rocks around Morrison's position as his team immediately returned fire. Rodriguez quickly established a casualty collection point behind the largest boulder, while Brooks began identifying targets for his grenade launcher. Williams laid down suppressive fire with his machine gun, the heavy weapon's distinctive sound adding to the growing cacophony of battle. From their overwatch position, Chen's element could see the full scope of the ambush unfolding below. Enemy fighters were emerging from spider holes and concealed bunkers that had been invisible until the firing started. The compound was not just a hiding place for a single high-value target. It was a fortress designed to trap and destroy any force that dared to attack it. Henderson's rifle cracked repeatedly as he engaged targets on the high ground, his precision shooting keeping enemy snipers from gaining clear shots at Morrison's pinned element. Morelli had identified a path that might allow them to flank some of the enemy positions, but it would require crossing open ground under fire. Parker was already moving in that direction, his submachine gun ready for the close-quarters fighting that was certain to come. The battle had been raging for 20 minutes when Chen realized the true scope of their predicament. More enemy fighters were moving into positions that would completely surround both SEAL elements. What had begun as an ambush was rapidly becoming an encirclement. He could see muzzle flashes from at least 15 different positions, far more than the 6 to 8 enemies that intelligence had predicted. Morrison's element was taking increasingly accurate fire from multiple directions. A bullet had grazed Rodriguez's shoulder, though the medic continued to treat a more serious wound that Williams had sustained when a ricochet had torn through his thigh. Brooks had expended most of his grenades trying to suppress the enemy positions, but for every fighter they eliminated, 2 more seemed to take his place. The radio crackled with terse communications as both elements reported their status. Ammunition was becoming a serious concern, and the enemy was clearly reinforcing their positions with fighters from other locations. Chen made the difficult decision to recommend immediate extraction, knowing that staying in place much longer would likely result in the complete destruction of both teams. But as he reached for his radio to contact their command post, Henderson's voice cut through the chaos with words that would change everything. The sniper had spotted something moving in the rocks high above the battlefield, something that didn't match the movement patterns of the enemy fighters they had been engaging. Someone else was out there in the mountains, someone who had been watching and waiting with the patience of a predator. Henderson adjusted his scope and tried to get a clear view of whatever was moving in those distant rocks. What he saw through his optics made him pause in amazement. Positioned among the boulders nearly 800 meters away was a lone figure with a rifle, completely invisible to the enemy fighters below, but with a perfect view of the entire battlefield. The mystery sniper was not wearing the same equipment as the Taliban fighters, and something about the way he moved suggested military training of the highest caliber. As if sensing Henderson's attention, the distant figure raised one hand in a subtle gesture that was unmistakably military. Then, he settled into a firing position and began to work with the methodical precision of a master craftsman. The first shot rang out across the valley, different in tone from the chaotic gunfire of the battle below. One of the enemy fighters who had been directing the encirclement suddenly dropped, his weapon clattering down the rocks as his body went limp. Chen immediately noticed the change in enemy fire patterns as confusion began to spread through their ranks. The fighters who had been confidently maneuvering to complete their encirclement suddenly found themselves being picked off by an invisible enemy who seemed to appear from nowhere. The mysterious sniper's position was so well concealed that even the SEALs, with all their training and experience, could barely make out his location. Morrison seized the opportunity created by the enemy's confusion. He ordered his element to begin a fighting withdrawal toward a more defensible position while the mystery sniper continued to thin the enemy ranks. Each shot was precisely placed, targeting enemy leaders and machine gunners who posed the greatest threat to the trapped SEALs. Within minutes, the seemingly hopeless situation had transformed into something that might actually be survivable. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the ambush began, Morrison allowed himself to believe that his team might actually make it home. Somewhere up in those ancient rocks, a guardian angel had appeared just when hope seemed lost. The question that burned in every SEAL's mind was simple but profound. Who was their mysterious savior? And why had he chosen to risk everything to save a team of American warriors he had never met? As the enemy fire began to slacken under the relentless precision of the hidden sniper, Shin coordinated his team's movement to link up with Morrison's element. They still faced a dangerous fighting withdrawal through hostile territory, but the mysterious marksman had given them something that had seemed impossible just minutes before: a chance to survive. The rocks above continued to echo with the sharp crack of a master sniper's rifle, each shot bringing them one step closer to seeing home again. The mysterious sniper's intervention had created chaos in the enemy ranks, but Morrison knew that confusion alone would not save his team. They needed to move quickly before the Taliban fighters regrouped and resumed their encirclement. The SEAL commander signaled for his element to begin a tactical withdrawal, using the covering fire from their hidden benefactor to bound from one piece of cover to the next. Rodriguez, despite his shoulder wound, maintained his medical vigilance as the team moved. Williams was struggling with his leg injury, but refused assistance, knowing that every SEAL needed to be able to fight if they were going to escape the kill zone. Brooks methodically conserved his remaining ammunition, making every shot count as enemy fighters tried to reposition themselves. From his overwatch position, Shin coordinated the complex dance of movement and fire that would either save his brothers or seal their fate. Henderson continued to engage targets of opportunity while keeping one eye on the mysterious sniper who had appeared like something out of a legend. Through his scope, he could barely make out the figure among the rocks, moving with a fluid precision that spoke of decades of experience. The enemy had begun to adapt to the presence of the unknown marksman, with several fighters attempting to locate his position by tracking his muzzle flashes. But the mysterious shooter seemed to anticipate every move they made, shifting positions between shots with an almost supernatural ability to remain undetected. His rifle work was poetry in motion, each bullet finding its target with mechanical precision. Morelli had identified a route that would allow Chin's element to begin moving toward Morrison's position, but it would require crossing a section of open ground that was covered by enemy positions. As he prepared to make the dangerous transit, the crack of the sniper's rifle echoed across the valley once again. The Taliban fighter who had been tracking Morelli through his own scope suddenly jerked backward, his weapon spinning away as he fell from his concealed position. The precision of the shot was breathtaking. The hidden marksman had somehow identified a threat that even the highly trained SEALs had missed, eliminating it with a single perfectly placed bullet from nearly a kilometer away. Morelli seized the opportunity and sprinted across the open ground, reaching Morrison's position without drawing a single shot from the remaining enemy fighters. Parker followed moments later, his movement covered by another impossibly accurate shot that eliminated a Taliban machine gunner who had been setting up to sweep the crossing point. The mysterious sniper was not just picking off targets of opportunity. He was actively protecting the SEAL team's movements with the kind of overwatch that spoke of intimate knowledge of small unit tactics. As the two SEAL elements began to consolidate their position, Henderson managed to establish brief radio contact with their hidden guardian. The voice that came through his headset was calm and professional, speaking English with a slight accent that Henderson could not immediately place. The man identified himself only as Shepard and provided crucial intelligence about enemy positions that the SEALs could not see from their current location. According to Shepard, the Taliban had brought in reinforcements from 3 different locations, turning the isolated compound into a major stronghold with nearly 40 fighters in prepared positions. The enemy was still attempting to complete their encirclement, but Shepard's intervention had disrupted their coordination and eliminated several key leaders. He warned that the SEALs had perhaps 30 minutes before the enemy regrouped sufficiently to resume their coordinated assault. Morrison absorbed this information while continuing to direct his team's defensive fire. The situation remained desperate despite Shepard's assistance. They were outnumbered 5-1, running low on ammunition, and facing an enemy that knew the terrain intimately. Even with their mysterious guardian angel providing overwatch, the odds of successfully fighting their way out of the valley seemed impossibly small. But Shepard had more than just accurate shooting to offer. His knowledge of the local terrain was extraordinary, suggesting years of experience operating in these specific mountains. He began providing detailed instructions for a withdrawal route that would take the SEALs through a series of ravines and boulder fields where the enemy's numerical advantage would be minimized. The route he described was treacherous, requiring the team to traverse narrow ledges and climb steep rock faces while under fire. But it offered something that no other escape path provided: the ability to move through terrain where Shepard could provide continuous overwatch from his concealed position. The mysterious marksman had positioned himself not just to observe the immediate battlefield, but to control a significant portion of the surrounding mountains. Chen made the decision to trust their unknown benefactor completely. The alternative was to remain in their current position until they were overwhelmed by superior numbers. At least Shepard's plan offered the possibility of survival, even if it meant putting their lives entirely in the hands of a man they had never met. The withdrawal began with Henderson and Parker providing covering fire while the rest of the team moved to the mouth of the ravine that Shepard had identified. The mysterious sniper's rifle continued to crack at regular intervals, each shot eliminating an enemy fighter who tried to interfere with the SEAL team's movement. His target selection showed an intimate understanding of small unit tactics, always focusing on the enemies who posed the greatest immediate threat. As the team entered the narrow confines of the ravine, Shepard's voice came through their radios again with updated intelligence. Enemy fighters were moving to block their escape route, positioning themselves in the rocks above the ravine where they could rain down fire on the trapped Americans. But Shepard was already adjusting his position to counter this threat, moving through the mountain terrain with the sure-footed confidence of someone who had spent years learning every trail and hiding place. Rodriguez was struggling to keep up with the pace despite his wound, but Williams had taken position beside him, helping the medic maintain the speed necessary for their survival. Brooks was conserving his remaining grenades for the close-quarters fighting that seemed inevitable as they moved deeper into the rocky maze that Shepard was guiding them through. The first enemy fighters appeared on the ridges above, just as Shepard had predicted, their weapons trained down into the ravine where the SEALs were moving. But before they could open fire, the sharp crack of the mysterious sniper's rifle echoed off the canyon walls. One of the enemy fighters toppled from his position, his body crashing down into the ravine just meters from the advancing Americans. The psychological effect of Shepard's shooting was becoming as important as the tactical advantage he provided. The Taliban fighters were beginning to show signs of genuine fear as their comrades continued to fall to an enemy they could not see or locate. Some were abandoning their positions rather than face the supernatural accuracy of the hidden marksman who seemed to appear and disappear like a ghost among the rocks. Morrison pressed the team forward, knowing that speed was their only ally in the current situation. Behind them, more enemy fighters were entering the ravine in pursuit, but they were advancing cautiously, clearly unnerved by the fate of their fellow fighters who had tried to stop the Americans. Shepard's rifle continued to speak at crucial moments, eliminating threats and keeping the pursuers at a respectful distance. As they climbed higher into the mountains, following the route that only Shepard seemed to know, Henderson caught glimpses of their mysterious guardian through his scope. The man moved through the terrain like water flowing around obstacles, always appearing exactly where he needed to be to provide the next crucial shot. His equipment appeared to be a mixture of military and civilian gear, suggesting someone who had learned to live and fight in these mountains for an extended period. The climb was taking its toll on the wounded team members, but they pressed on with the grim determination that had carried them through countless previous missions. Chun coordinated their movement with growing confidence in Shepard's guidance, following the mysterious sniper's instructions even when they seemed to lead toward impossible terrain. After 2 hours of climbing and fighting, the team reached a position that Shepard identified as a temporary rally point. From their elevated position, they could see the compound where their mission had begun, now swarming with enemy fighters who were clearly frustrated by their inability to corner the American team. The Taliban had committed significant resources to what they had expected to be an easy victory, but Shepard's intervention had turned their trap into a costly failure. As the SEALs caught their breath and treated their wounds, Shepard's voice came through their radios with an unexpected offer. He would guide them to a location where helicopter extraction was possible, but reaching it would require several more hours of movement through terrain that was certain to be crawling with enemy fighters. The alternative was to remain in their current position and hope that air support could reach them before they were overwhelmed. Morrison studied the faces of his team members, seeing the exhaustion and pain that each man carried, but also the unbreakable determination that defined the SEAL Brotherhood. They had come too far to quit now, and somewhere out in those rocks was a guardian angel who had already proven his willingness to risk everything for their survival. The decision was unanimous. They would trust Shepard to lead them home, no matter what dangers lay ahead in the mountains. The journey through the high mountain terrain tested every limit of the SEAL team's endurance and training. Shepard's route took them along narrow ledges where a single misstep would mean a fatal fall, through boulder fields where enemy fighters could be hiding behind every rock, and across steep slopes where loose scree threatened to trigger avalanches that would reveal their position to every Taliban fighter in the valley below. But their mysterious guide seemed to know every secret that these ancient mountains held. His voice came through their radios at crucial moments, warning of hidden crevasses, directing them around unstable rock formations, and identifying the safest paths through terrain that appeared completely impassable. More importantly, his rifle continued to provide the precise covering fire that kept enemy pursuit at a manageable distance. Rodriguez was weakening from blood loss despite his attempts to treat his own wound, but the team's medic refused to slow their pace. He understood as well as anyone that their survival depended on reaching the extraction point before the Taliban could organize a comprehensive search of the mountain region. Williams had fashioned a makeshift crutch from a piece of deadfall, allowing him to keep up despite his leg wound, though each step sent waves of pain through his damaged limb. Henderson maintained his role as the team's designated marksman, engaging targets when they appeared while trying to catch glimpses of Shepard through his scope. What he observed during those brief sightings was remarkable. The mysterious sniper moved through the rocks with an almost supernatural grace, appearing and disappearing like morning mist among the boulders. His equipment appeared worn but meticulously maintained, and his shooting positions were selected with the eye of someone who understood these mountains at an intimate level. Chun coordinated the team's movement with growing respect for their unseen guardian's tactical knowledge. Shepard's route was taking them through terrain that military maps classified as impassable, yet he guided them along paths that seemed to have been carved specifically for their escape. The mysterious marksman's knowledge extended far beyond simple marksmanship. He understood mountain warfare with the expertise of someone who had spent years perfecting the deadly art of fighting in vertical terrain. The Taliban pursuit was relentless, but cautious. Enemy fighters had learned to fear the invisible sniper who seemed capable of appearing anywhere in the vast mountain landscape. Several times, Chen observed pursuit teams stopping abruptly and withdrawing when they encountered areas where Shepard had good fields of fire. The psychological warfare was as effective as the physical elimination of enemy fighters. Brooks had been carefully rationing his remaining explosive devices, but Shepard's voice came through their radios with a suggestion that would require most of their remaining ordnance. The mysterious sniper had identified a narrow defile where the mountain trail passed between towering cliff faces. If they could trigger a controlled rockslide in that location, it would block the primary route that Taliban reinforcements were using to close off their escape. The plan was dangerous in the extreme. Brooks would need to remain behind to set and detonate the charges while the rest of the team continued toward the extraction point. But Shepard assured them that he would provide overwatch for the demolition expert, keeping enemy fighters away until the charges were set. The mysterious marksman's confidence was infectious, and Brooks accepted the mission without hesitation. As they approached the target location, Shepard's shooting became even more remarkable. He engaged Taliban fighters who were positioning themselves to interfere with the demolition, eliminating threats that the SEALs could not even see from their position in the canyon below. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, targeting enemy leaders and heavy weapons crews who posed the greatest danger to the mission. Brooks worked with practiced efficiency, placing his charges in locations that Shepard identified through their radio communications. The mysterious sniper's knowledge of geology was as impressive as his marksmanship, directing the demolition expert to stress points in the rock face that would maximize the effectiveness of their limited explosives. Within 20 minutes, Brooks had created a demolition array that would bring down thousands of tons of rock when detonated. The team withdrew to a safe distance while Brooks prepared to trigger the charges. At that crucial moment, Shepard's voice came through their radios with urgent warnings about enemy fighters who were attempting to rush the demolition site before the explosives could be detonated. His rifle spoke rapidly, engaging multiple targets in quick succession as Taliban fighters tried desperately to prevent the destruction of their primary pursuit route. The explosion, when it came, shook the entire mountain. Massive boulders tumbled down the cliff faces, creating an impenetrable barrier that would take the enemy hours to clear or circumvent. The sound echoed through the valleys like thunder, announcing to every fighter in the region that the American team was still alive and still fighting. But the blast also revealed their approximate location to every enemy unit in the area. Shepard's voice returned to their radios with updates on enemy movement that painted a sobering picture. Taliban fighters were converging on their position from multiple directions, and time was running short to reach the extraction point before they were completely surrounded once again. The pace of their movement increased as exhaustion battled against the desperate need for speed. Rodriguez was now being supported by Parker, the wounded medic's strength finally beginning to fail after hours of climbing and fighting. Williams continued to push forward on his makeshift crutch, leaving a trail of blood on the rocks, but refusing to accept assistance that would slow the team's movement. Shepard began appearing more frequently in their peripheral vision, no longer maintaining the complete invisibility that had characterized his earlier actions. Henderson realized that their guardian was deliberately exposing himself to greater risk in order to provide closer support as they approached the most dangerous phase of their escape. The mysterious sniper was moving parallel to their route, using his intimate knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead of enemy forces while maintaining overwatch on the SEAL team's movement. During one brief rest stop, Henderson managed to establish longer radio contact with Shepard and asked the question that had been burning in every team member's mind. Who was he? And why was he risking his life for a team of American warriors he had never met? The answer came in a voice that carried decades of pain and determination. Shepard identified himself as Master Sergeant William Ghost Thompson, a former Army Special Forces operator who had been declared missing in action during a classified mission in these same mountains 18 months earlier. He had been captured by Taliban forces but had escaped during a prisoner transfer, disappearing into the mountain wilderness where he had been living and fighting ever since. His knowledge of the terrain came from months of survival in conditions that would have killed most men, learning every cave and trail while conducting a one-man guerrilla war against the enemy forces that had held him prisoner. The revelation explained everything about their mysterious guardian's capabilities. Thompson was not just a skilled marksman operating in unfamiliar territory. He was a ghost seeking redemption, a warrior who had been given up for dead but refused to quit fighting. His intervention in the SEAL team's desperate situation was more than tactical assistance. It was his chance to strike a devastating blow against the enemy forces that had cost him everything he held dear. Thompson's story poured out during their brief radio contact, revealing a tale of survival that bordered on the impossible. He had been living off the land, scavenging equipment from enemy fighters he had eliminated, and conducting precision strikes against Taliban leadership throughout the region. His actions had been attributed to rival tribal factions, allowing him to remain undetected while systematically disrupting enemy operations. But Thompson's war had been a lonely one until he spotted the SEAL team moving into what he recognized as a carefully prepared trap. Years of solitary fighting had not diminished his commitment to the brotherhood of warriors who shared the burden of protecting others. When he saw American fighters walking into an ambush, there had been no question about his course of action. Morrison absorbed this information while continuing to push his team toward their objective. The knowledge that their guardian angel was a fellow American operator, presumed dead but still fighting against overwhelming odds, added new urgency to their mission. They were no longer just escaping enemy territory. They were bringing a lost warrior home. As they climbed higher into the mountains, following trails that Thompson had scouted during his months of solitary survival, the SEAL team began to understand the true scope of their guardian's achievement. He had not merely survived in hostile territory. He had turned the enemy's own mountain fortress against them, learning every secret pathway and hidden position that allowed him to strike without warning and disappear without trace. The extraction point was still hours away, and enemy fighters continued to close in from multiple directions. But for the first time since their mission had gone wrong, the SEAL team felt something approaching confidence. They were no longer alone in the mountains. They had found their lost brother, and together they would fight their way home or die trying. In either case, they would face their fate as warriors united by bonds that transcended duty and approached the sacred. The revelation of Thompson's identity had transformed the SEAL team's desperate escape into something approaching a reunion, but the tactical situation remained dire. Enemy forces were converging on their position from 3 different directions, and the extraction point that Thompson had identified was still several kilometers away through terrain that offered numerous opportunities for ambush. The clock was ticking toward a confrontation that would test every skill they possessed. Thompson's knowledge of enemy tactics had been earned through 18 months of careful observation and deadly experience. He warned the team that the Taliban had learned to coordinate their pursuit operations using a network of spotters positioned on high peaks throughout the mountain region. Their escape had been tracked from the moment they left the compound, and enemy commanders were now deploying their forces to create a final trap at the extraction point itself. Morrison weighed their options with the grim realization that conventional extraction was no longer possible. The enemy had too much time to prepare, and the helicopter landing zone that Thompson had identified would be heavily defended long before their aircraft could arrive. They needed a new plan that would use their combined skills to turn the Taliban's trap against them. Thompson proposed a strategy that was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of attempting to reach the original extraction point, they would establish a defensive position in terrain of their choosing and force the enemy to come to them. He had identified a location where the mountain geography would allow them to create overlapping fields of fire while minimizing the enemy's numerical advantage. The plan was dangerous, but it offered something that running no longer could: the opportunity to fight on their own terms. The position Thompson had selected was a natural fortress carved by geological forces over millions of years. A cluster of massive boulders created a defensive perimeter with excellent concealment and multiple firing positions. More importantly, the approaches to this position were limited to narrow defile, where enemy forces could be engaged at maximum range while their numbers counted for little. Chun coordinated the team's movement toward this final stronghold, while Henderson continued to engage pursuing forces. The enemy was becoming bolder as darkness approached, closing the distance between hunter and hunted with the confidence of predators who believed their prey was finally cornered. But they had not counted on facing a combined force that included a ghost warrior who knew every secret these mountains contained. Rodriguez was barely conscious as Parker helped him maintain the pace necessary to reach their defensive position. The team's medic had lost significant blood, and his condition was deteriorating rapidly. Williams was in slightly better shape, but still struggling with his leg wound, drawing strength from pure determination and the knowledge that his brothers needed him to keep fighting. Brooks had expended most of his explosive ordnance creating the rock slide, but he retained enough demolitions to prepare nasty surprises for any enemy force that attempted to assault their position. Thompson guided him in placing charges that would channel attacking forces into kill zones where concentrated fire could devastate their ranks. As they reached the defensive position that would become their final battleground, Thompson finally emerged from the shadows that had concealed him throughout their escape. The man who approached was lean to the point of gauntness, his equipment a mixture of military gear and improvised solutions that spoke of long months spent living off the land. But his eyes burned with the focused intensity of a warrior who had found his purpose in the crucible of solitary warfare. Henderson was struck by the almost supernatural calm that Thompson displayed as he prepared for what might be his final battle. The former Special Forces operator moved through their defensive perimeter with the sure confidence of someone who had chosen his ground carefully and was prepared to extract maximum cost from any enemy force that dared to attack it. The SEAL team established their positions with practiced efficiency, creating interlocking fields of fire that would allow them to engage attackers from multiple angles. Thompson positioned himself in a location that provided maximum visibility across the approaches while remaining concealed from enemy observation. His rifle was a precision instrument that had been carefully maintained despite months of field use, and his ammunition was rationed with the care of someone who understood that every shot might be his last. Chen established communications with their command post, providing updated coordinates and requesting immediate air support. But the nearest friendly aircraft were hours away, and weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly as mountain storms moved into the region. They would face the coming assault with nothing but their skills, their weapons, and the bond of brotherhood that united them in their determination to survive. The first probing attacks came as the sun disappeared behind the mountain peaks, small groups of Taliban fighters attempting to identify weak points in the defensive perimeter. Thompson's rifle spoke with mechanical precision, eliminating enemy scouts before they could report back on American positions. Each shot was placed with the careful calculation of someone who had learned to make ammunition count during long months of solitary fighting. Morrison coordinated their defensive fire with growing confidence in their position's advantages. The enemy was being forced to attack across open ground where American firepower could devastate their ranks, while the defenders remained concealed among boulders that provided excellent protection from return fire. It was exactly the kind of tactical situation that elite warriors trained their entire careers to exploit. As darkness fell, the Taliban assault intensified. Enemy forces approached from multiple directions simultaneously, trying to overwhelm the defenders through sheer weight of numbers. But Thompson had anticipated this tactic, positioning himself where he could engage the most dangerous threats while the SEAL team concentrated their fire on the main assault forces. The battle that followed was a masterpiece of defensive warfare. Thompson's rifle eliminated enemy leaders and machine gunners with supernatural accuracy, disrupting coordinated attacks before they could gain momentum. Henderson engaged targets of opportunity with his designated marksman rifle, working in perfect coordination with Thompson to create a deadly crossfire that caught attacking forces in the open. Williams, despite his wound, maintained devastating fire with his light machine gun, sweeping entire sections of the approach routes clear of enemy fighters. Parker used his submachine gun to deadly effect when Taliban forces managed to close within short range, while Brooks employed his remaining explosives to channel attacks into predetermined kill zones. Chen coordinated their defensive fire while simultaneously calling in target coordinates for the air support that was still hours away. But he began to realize that they might not need external assistance if they could maintain their current rate of success. The enemy was paying an enormous price for each meter of ground they gained, and their attacks were becoming increasingly disorganized as losses mounted. Rodriguez, despite his weakened condition, continued to provide medical support when team members were hit by enemy fire. His calm professionalism under extreme stress helped maintain the team's morale even as the intensity of combat reached levels that tested their endurance and ammunition supplies. The turning point came when Thompson identified the enemy commander who was directing the assault from a concealed position several hundred meters away. The shot he fired at that distant target was his finest achievement as a marksman, eliminating the tactical brain that was coordinating the Taliban attacks with surgical precision across an impossible distance in near-total darkness. The death of their commander threw the attacking forces into confusion just as they had begun to gain some tactical advantage. Individual groups continued to press their attacks, but the coordinated pressure that had threatened to overwhelm the defensive position began to falter. Thompson and the SEAL.